zdravo. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm sorry my talk is in English. The other talks sounded super interesting, but unfortunately I couldn't understand. But today I'm going to talk to you a little bit, as Masha just said, about a project that I've been developing for the last year, that it's called Somoure. Somoure, it's a Catalan word. It looks like French. Catalan and French are similar, which means something that moves, you know, like when you shake something, something that shakes. And it didn't start like this, but I ended up putting the subtitle of robotic as a practice of care. And it was developed together, like, well, now I'm going more like on my own, but it was started to be developed at the Institute of Industrial Robotics in Barcelona. And I just want to start with this video. It's just a part of a video.
Dicen que la tasa de dependencia de las personas mayores en Cataluña pasará del 29% en 2021 al 44% en 2040 y más del 50% en 2070. En 2040 tendré 53 años, en 2070 83. Últimamente pienso mucho en el tiempo. Nos dicen que nuestras opciones se reducen con el paso del tiempo, que preparemos bien el terreno para la vejez. ¿Cómo quieres morir? Aunque no podamos elegir, preferimos en casa. Una casa. Una persona muy querida me comentaba que entendía mi deseo de comprar una casa. Quienes estamos solas, buscamos arraigo en un lugar propio, un ancla en medio de la incertidumbre. Lo había visto antes en su otra amiga. La necesidad de un hogar cuando no se puede o quiere formar una familia.
So, there was, the subtitles were very small, but don't worry, I'll tell you now. This actually was the video. It's the middle outcome of this project, Somoure, that I'm telling you about, that I'm continuing developing. And actually what the video says, what I say in the video, actually it's an AI says in the video, it's not my voice. It's the starting paragraph, like the starting sentences of the STARS residency, which is a European program of science, arts and technology that I got granted for creating this project. And it basically what it says is that in Catalonia, that it's where I live, the dependency ratio of elderly people will raise in the end like 25% in the following years. And that's why this open call was inviting artists to come and work with engineers of robotics to improve the social acceptance of assistive robotics. At that point, I looked at the grant, and obviously, I mean, we're artists, and you get quite a good funding, and it was an opportunity for me to work with with a scientific lab. In my idea, like the idea, I thought it was like closely, you know, for some time, for 6 months. And I really didn't know anything about assistive robotics, and not even anything about assistance. I'm not a mom. My parents don't need assistance. I'm quite independent. I'm able, you know, I take care of myself. So I wasn't that much related to that topic, but my idea was like, oh, that's cool, you know, I can do experiments with moving expression, because the work that you can see here was part of a research and an obsession that I had about how can artificial intelligence or cognitive systems made with technology express themselves through other expressive ways that are not written or spoken language. So basically we connect with artificial intelligence through speech, right? We talk with chatbots, like ChatGPT is the most popular one, and others. So that's how we interpret, that's how we define intelligence right now. But I've been very interested in embodied cognition and how can things express and how can actually robots create their own language with the movement, you know, in the physical world. You know, that can bring us to new ways of connecting and experiencing and communicating with technology. So that was a little bit my idea, and their idea, or the intention of the residency, was to answer this question: is how can art play an active role in improving the interaction between humans and robots? But when I arrived to to the laboratory, it was completely different than what I thought. That's quite normal. I mean, you have some ideas, you go on a residency, and even if it's in your hometown, which I just realized, the expectations and the objectives of two people that meet, two groups of people, or two agents that meet together to create a project that haven't worked together anymore, it always changes everything. And I think that for artists, it is very important that when we engage in these projects, we come with an open mind, which I always try to, and let us be led by by the flow, sorry. And for engineers, it's a little bit more complicated, I realize, but little by little, or at least the engineers I work with at the beginning, there's more resistance because, well, I'll spend a little bit more in depth this thing, but basically what I realized, the questions that arise from the first months of my residency, of my research, was like, how can we, that we were talking about something more than developing and creating robots. Working in assistive robotics is more than creating technologies, is actually shaping a future, is defining how me as a woman, independent, whatever, like right now, will age in the future. It's the starting point of the residency is like, how are we going to be relating with technology in 2070, right? So the questions that arises from that was like, how do we imagine aging in the non-future? Right? Because, yeah, we all know there's a future, but now we're in this area where there's no future. Like, there's all these disasters happening around us, so how is that going to be, no? Another question that for me was very interesting because I come from critical technologies, from critical design, for a little bit of activism. So for me, it was very important to get to know which voices, who are the people that have the power and the access to define this future, who is actually creating technology right now, and in my context, that for me was very interesting also to learn. Another questions, because I started doing a lot of conceptual research, is about assistance and care, because as I told you, it wasn't something that I was super related to. Is like, do this practice need to be created, or developed in the intimate sphere, that meaning the family, that meaning a close friendship circles, or it should be approached from a political and a communal perspective, like saying, what are our governments, or our politics, or the design of the cities and everything, doing for taking care of this care of the future, right? And the one that really touched me, my interest in my usual practice, is that does it really make sense to try to improve the acceptance of technology and assistive technology if we're not taking care of humans that are actually giving assistive labor, like that are working on assistive labor, which, for example, in Spain, and probably in other parts of Europe is the same, the assistive and the care practices or labor is made by people that are not even in a legal situation in our countries, right? So what's going on? What's happening with care, right? So another thing that I found, that it's what I started saying, is that it is very challenging to work in a lab, or at least for me, it was kind of challenging to work in a lab. Not because they were bad and I was good. I'm not working with this, like, I don't like this categorization. It's not that. It's just that we both, and I include myself, didn't know what was actually happening. So I'm going to start with criticizing myself, not the others. So I come from the world of art, science, and technology. I go to a lot of festivals everywhere. We just give, in Spain we have this sentence, like, we give us massages, it's like we are very happy to meet each other, and talk about how much art brings to technology, but it's only us talking about these things all the time. So then there's no one telling us, like, what are you doing, And if someone says, what are you doing? You're like, oh, you don't know about what we're talking about, right? But then you go to a scientific lab as an artist, and you're like, I do all these things in art, and it's like, yeah, but what you do is different, We make technology. Like, technology is made here because we are a lab and we are engineers. And, oh, maybe you can paint something for the lab. And it's like, what? And it's not that we are, as I said, it's not that we're right, they're wrong, or they're right and we're wrong. It's just a thing that it's disconnected. And this disconnection between different fields, I think it's a thing that happens, that it starts from school. you know, and it's a thing of education, that it's rooted in the education. It's rooted on what things are made for people that like maths and what things are made for people that like arts and what things are made for women, for men, you know, all these type of things, you know, who has access? That's the thing that I was telling you about before. Who has access? And not even like men and women. It's like, what about different cultures, you know? What about the people that, that come and live in other countries, and what type of accesses do they have, these people, to define and to participate in the building of technology, which I really believe 100% that is the creation of culture, and especially of the culture of the future, right? If there is any future. So basically, the four like main points that I found regarding my experience in the lab was that, yeah, engineers really thought that art and sociology and the humanities in general, could take part in the research. Actually, one of the main researchers there is Karma Torres, which is a very famous and well-known robotics engineer, that she's been writing science fiction, you know, collaborating with MIT and a lot of things. But they always see art like in the outskirts of the research, art and humanities, sorry, outside. Even like there's a poster, there's something very meaningful, like there's posters where are like, oh, this is where like technological research happens, and then sociology and all the rest are in the outskirts, right? Like doing the dissemination part and helping us understand. But I keep wondering, and I think I have it in the other slide that it's coming up now. I kept wondering, like, how can actually the experimentation that we have with art really actuate in the core of the research? You know, for example, in building the architectural structures of the code, you know, or experimenting in that sense. Also, another thing that it was very shocking for me, coming from the maker and hacker ethics and community, is like that they are the engineering mind of the engineers that I was working with. They were focused on solving technological problems, and of course, like an engineer solves technological problems, but they get separated with the result. In my opinion, it's very difficult to do that when you're working with social concerns, and especially it's going to be much more complicated from now with the artificial intelligence shift of how we do technology and how we create technology. So we cannot really separate how we make technology and what the results are. Oh yeah, I said all this then. So from my perspective, as I said, the artistic research, which is like kind of getting more attention lately. It's difficult to explain what artistic research is, I think, at least from my experience. But we, like people that try to engage with this type of practice, we don't focus on solutions. We focus on creating and on opening actually more questions. It's like it's not result oriented in that sense, but it's like it's a thing of exploration, of opening up. And I realized that it's very, very different to what engineers are used to, which are like focused oriented. And also, this another very interesting thing that I found out is the way the teams work there, and the way usually artists are focused on a single character person or the name of a studio, which is usually led by one person. That we can get into that. That actually, for me, has to do more with precarity and not getting found. But that's another topic. And one thing that for me also was very important when my bubble busted and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do all this super cool research with these engineers, is like, how can, it's like the communication, you know, and these expectations and everything were very different. And for me, it was like, how can we design practices to adapt communication and create shared interest among disciplines, right? It's like, how can I come here with a project and make you think that you are collaborating with me and that it's also relevant for you? You know, how can we create this something that is relevant for us? And I think, for example, that's not fair, that sometimes in our cases where artists are invited to laboratories, is that responsibility relays on us. And we cannot be producing an artwork, producing the residency, and trying to create an activity to make the engineers interested in what you're doing. And also make the engineers believe that what you're doing is actually meaningful. So, you know, so it's like, it was a very confusing time of my life, but very open, like it opened me a lot of critical thinking, you know, and stuff. And in my, like a little bit as a personal conclusion, which I don't think they should be, but from my perspective, I realized that the production processes that they were using for creating assistive robotic was completely away, or they were completely ignoring the local, in Barcelona, caregiving tradition and social realities of assistive labor. And for me, that was raising concerns about who is funding and who leads that research, that I will explain a little bit more about that later.
La familia. Pienso que sin familia, tal vez se dejaría de romantizar los cuidados. Dejarían de verse como un asunto privado, tal vez. Serían asuntos públicos y comunes. Una cuestión política.
So, when I overcome my imposter syndrome, because I had a lot of imposter syndrome while I was there, to be honest, I realized that, there's not that much separate. I was hanging out there, I was trying to find something meaningful for me, also to work in something that would matter to one and another. And then I realized that they were doing this little guy here, that it's called ñam. Ñam is like the onomatopoeia for when you eat. I don't know in Slovenian, but in Spanish it is. So they were creating this little guy, and for me, like that I do handmade electronics and handmade robots, that was an industrial research lab. And I was like, how am I going to work with these robots? It's like I cannot open them. I think with my hands. I sketch with the drill. That's what my friend says. So it's like, how am I going to work with these things, right? And I told them, and I realized that they were doing an in-house version of this robot, which is a feeding robot, of course. And I was like, okay, it's like, the time I'm going to spend here doing this residency, you're going to be building this guy. I live in Barcelona, the residency in Barcelona, so I'm going to follow the development of that robot. I also, they were doing it with robot operating system. I've been using robot operating system too, so for me it was easy. They were working with similar motors that I've been working, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to follow the development of this robot, and then I'm going to create the hacked version, or my version, of the feeding robot. But the difference between the robot, of course, the robot that they were building in the laboratory has a very like a very industrial, of course, view, or they have the view of putting that in the market, and become a product. And as artists, we don't need to do that. And I think that's cool, that's a free thing. So my idea was to build the robot that I would like to have if I cannot feed myself, And the idea for making that was that the main idea for making that is, it also comes from my maker and hacker background, which kind of argues that if you bring the user, or bring the person that is going to use the technology inside the creation process of the technology itself, it will feel more related, and it will feel that part of its spirit. It's in that robot. That also helped me, in the other hand, for creating these relevant points that I was telling you about, right? So first of all, I was in the office, I don't know, whatever, like in the top part of the laboratory, and when I started developing this little guy with them, so they had their copy. I was recreating it with buying the same components and everything. I went out to the basement where the electronics were happening, and that was very cool because it gave me like a lot of informal situations to engage with the engineer. Which that's also very important. I think that one very important thing of interdisciplinary research is creating informal moments, and moments where you're not actually working, where you're just hanging out. And that's when you find that we are not that different. You like you're working with Arduino. I come from before Arduino, and we used to do this and that. Tell me more about this, and then, let's have a beer. And, and things just organically happen. And then you start learning, I started learning how they really work there. Also, like the hierarchies and as I told you, the team structures and everything that they had, that for me was very, alien in a sense. Also, I chose this, I didn't kind of choose it, but I thought it was a very, very good opportunity to work with a feeding robot, because if you want to improve the social acceptance, or if you are actually talking with people that don't know that much about technology, that fear technology or a little bit or something, if you tell them, do you want to be fed by a robot? everybody says no. It's like it's such a visceral, it's such a personal and intimate thing that someone puts something in your mouth, that doesn't really happen normally. Like it's a very intimate situation that it would trigger a lot of emotional things that I would actually like to have in my research, because apart from apart from creating this replica of the robot, I was at the same time, that I will explain you a little bit more now, doing conceptual research and going to meetings with different people and creating focus groups to understand more what assistance was, in a sense, and about how the labor of assistance was being developed in my context. And that being said, being fed is a very intimate act, or fact, unless you need to be fed every day, or unless you need to feed someone every day, That's when you stop. That's when it stops being something very personal and very intimate to be something a little bit automated or mechanic. In this sense, and regarding, I just wanted to put this quote that I'm not going to read everything, but I think like the last part, it actually. It's very focused on what I just said, is like we have to acknowledge that like us humans, care has always been post-human. It's a relationship produced by and through the constant flux of tools, technologies, behaviors, embodiments, economies, and ecologies. That's obviously a very post-human view, but that's a very important thing I discovered.
Irían sin la familia, la amistad, claro. ¿Y más allá de lo humano? Un robot, el sustituto perfecto del humano. ¿Y por qué no? No me miréis así. Ni siquiera ahora sabemos qué nos queda de humanos. No sé por qué os extrañáis tanto. Un robot necesita cuidados, pero no hay que nutrirlo. Es un cuerpo que no crece, pero debe mantenerse. Pertenece a la subjetividad de mente. Esta forma distinta de afectividad sirve como excusa para legitimar la exclusión social de los que la contienen. Pero el robot no es un ente independiente, es una red de interrelaciones que va más allá de la tecnología. Puede ser reflejo y extensión de diferentes modos de existencia y pensamiento, la imaginación de una estructura del futuro. Al robot lo llenamos de ideas.
So as a summary, of the things I just told you, I was developing on one hand an artistic replica of the Nyam robot. I was presenting assistive robotics as an assemblage of social, political, and community relationships. I was trying to promote interdisciplinary collaboration of human-centered design and questioning the agency in the production of technology. And also a thing that it was for me was very important while I was thinking like how I would develop that robot, is to allow the public to observe the robot's decision-making process for promoting a relationship of trust towards technology. That means that for me it was very important to let people see the behavioral tree or the code architecture, or participate in the way of also making these decisions and seeing how the robot is going to interact. So the methodology I used last year, because now I'm in a new phase, was in one hand this observation of this phase of observation where I was hanging out in the lab, seeing how they were interacting, and all these things, and then creating these meetings of interdisciplinary collaboration. What did that involve? So I was lucky enough to have a relationship before with in different parts of my life. I've been in touch with different people that don't normally participate in the conversation about technology development. They don't really participate in many conversations because they are kind of like a little bit outsiders of political decisions and these type of things, which were, in one hand, the Syndicate of Women Workers of Household and Care, which is a syndicate that was formed 11 years ago in Barcelona, and it's mainly, I could say 99% created by women from the Global South that have came to Barcelona to find a better conditions of their life, and they end up working in in care and assistive technologies, practices, not technologies. And they do every Thursday a meeting, and I used to just go there and hang out with them and understand what being someone that a worker, like a care worker means. And also for me, it was very shocking engaging in that. Just going there and hanging out with them, because I was one day one day of the week I was hanging out in the lab, and with a very specific profile of people, which were mostly men, white, everybody was white, of course, and as I told you, with this very scientific and technological mind. And then on every Thursday, I was going with this group of women. Everything was super emotional. Obviously, it was something that it was super separated from my reality. I was trying to always deal with that in the most respectful way that I could. I was just there listening, And a very interesting thing that they did, that they do actually every Thursday, is that they prepared food. They all eat together, and each one of them is in charge of cooking every different day of the week, and they usually do foods from their home countries, So for them, eating, it's a very social and it's a very emotional thing. And when obviously they knew that I was, working in this assistive robotic project, that it had to do with a feeding robot, And obviously they are people that know nothing about technology, and they were mistaken in many things too. I'm not saying they were completely right, They had misunderstandings also in technology, but I tell you, like going every day there, for me personally, it gave me also very emotional moments of a human connection, in a sense. Like, I don't know how to explain this, but with a lot of respect, with all the struggles these people are facing, the human support and the networks of care that were actually being developed there had nothing to do with the things that the people were doing assistive robotics. Obviously, it's not there; they don't have to do that, But it was a very impressive clash and a very interesting thing for me in the project to have in mind. Then also, these are the engineers from the lab, and also I've been also in touch with Xavi and Patricia. Xavi has been a friend of mine from maker spaces and maker communities for a very long time, and they are two people with disabilities, and they are activists for the rights of people with disabilities, actually very, very focused on the sexual rights of people with disabilities. And I also invited them, I made them an interview. I asked them, like, wait, what do you think, about robotics? Which was very interesting, because he loves technology, and she is not that much into technology, But they are dancers, so their actual work is like they have a dance company, and she does dance therapy with other people, and it was very interesting the way they see their bodies. I started saying that for me was, I started this project thinking about cognitive embodied cognition, and physical expression. So seeing bodies that are not normative, expressing themselves with their bodies, and talking. The interview is very interesting because they were talking to me about how people perceive their bodies, how they don't want to be touched, and also for me, contact and touch with the robot was something that I was interested on. So having these people that were completely outsiders of the art, science, technology, and of the world that I come from, and not really related with the type of people they are in touch in the laboratory, it was very good and enriching. And also, I must say that the project NYAM, it's being funded by a half private, half public hospital, and it's not only a hospital, it's they also have residencies for people that need to be cared for. And one very interesting thing that and I also went there when they were doing the tests, And one thing that it was very interesting is that seeing the ratio of people or patients that the people that work there have. So if you work in a hospital, you tend to have 8 patients under your responsibility as a worker. Obviously, they were all 95% women. And if you work in a residency, you can have up to 30 people. And from these 30 people, 10 of them need to be fed. And you only have 45 minutes to feed everybody. So it was very interesting seeing how automated everything was already, you know, and it was also very interesting, like when the people were, like when the workers were asking, like, why do we need a feeding robot, you know? It's like, this is not going to work, because how are you feeding? Oh, these people maybe chokes, this person maybe, you know? So, and something very interesting that came up in one of the talks was like, you know, it would be better if you do a robot for mouth hygiene, you know, because they don't want to do that, you know? So it was like, I think creating a feeding robot is a super interesting challenge. I think in the lab they are doing something very cool, but who needs that? You know, what? And that's the, as I told you, like the framework of all this STARS residency was like, how can you improve the social acceptance of robotics? And it's like, where's the social? Like, where are the people? Like, have you asked people about what they need? And I know it's not the job of the engineers, but in the end, for me, there was also a thing that kept coming to my mind is like, it's a very big European grant, you know? Is Europe putting money on us being home, kept by robots when we don't even maybe have homes? I don't know what's the situation in Slovenia, but gentrification is very bad in Barcelona, you know? So it's like, a lot of things were coming to my mind around that. So the way that I could, the way that I could, because I didn't want to create conflict. This is not conflict, you know, this is a conversation. It's an open conversation between a lot of agents that need to be in the table, sitting together, having a conversation. Me as an artist just took the role of a mediator. As I told you, I came with an open mind, I had an idea, I realized this was bigger than whatever I could do related to art, so I stepped out, I invited a lot of people, I started talking with different people, and then I invited some of them to sit together. And why do I say some of them? Because if you want a conversation to happen and to be, and people to understand each other, they have to speak the same language. For me, it wouldn't make no sense to get my friend Xavi and bring him to have a conversation with the director of the lab, because they won't understand each other, you know? One person maybe would be very reactive, and the other person can be not interested, you know? So then, maybe not in the first step, this would be something that would come out with something interesting. So what I did is I got people from the academia that I kind of knew that work in critical tech and in sociology, you know, and I was very lucky that Karina, which is here, which is the leader of the Syndicate of Women Workers, she actually comes from academia, and she has a PhD and everything, and she could come also to the lab, you know, and speak in the same language, you know, and understanding also the pressures of academia. You know, because one thing, when I overcome my imposter syndrome of being there in the lab, I was like, yeah, you know, art, science, technology, we all the time need to produce, you know, and do something that it can be exhibited and doesn't break all the time, and you know, all these things. But people from the robotics lab had so much pressure on writing papers. So it was like, more or less it's the same, you know, you need to write a paper, pass a peer review, go to a conference, blah, 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 you know, so in the end, it wasn't like that different. But then what's the meaningful part of technology? What is really happening? Like, what are we all doing, you know? So, well, that being said, the video that you've been, yeah, well, I still have some time, but I don't want to, I speak very fast anyway. The time was gone, you know, as I told you, there's pressure of creating artworks. I needed to exhibit the work in Manifesta Bienal in Barcelona, and I was like, you know, I'm not rushing it. The robot is not finished. Their robot wasn't finished because they follow their timings, you know. I'm following their development of the robot. They need to finish the robot so I can finish the robot, and after that, I need to do my version of the robot, you know. And that's not going to happen in 6 months, which is another critique. Is like, I cannot like create in 6 months a meaningful artistic research that levels up to 5 or 7 years of whatever they've been doing in the lab, you know? So I'm like, you know, chill. I'm going to do a video, which is the parts of the video you've been seeing. You can see it in my website. It's only 5 minutes long, the whole thing. The subtitles are a little bit bigger if you see them on Vimeo. And I'm like, I'm just going to do a video essay about all the conceptual research that I've done to here, so people, you know, can get all this idea of what I've been telling you about. And then I will create a robot that is more focused on the expressive layer. That is what I told you. No, I don't need to focus that much on the productive layer, on creating it a product, but I can engage in the expressive part of it. And the idea is that when I finish the robot, which is going to be like very soon, I want to convince some groups, let's say that way, or maybe the people from the hospital or something, to test both robots together, and see what's the feeling that the people get, or have some merge research. Basically, the experimental NAM replica wants to redefine the robot development as a caregiving process itself. So as I told you, as the title of this talk is like technology as a practice of care. For me, it's like super straightforward. Like I completely understand it. As I told you, coming from a non-engineer background, from hacker and maker spaces and communities, it's super obvious. It's like you create, like it's part of it. You care about it, no? We have our robots down here, whatever, and we take care of them, I treat them as my babies in a way, but then I switch them off. It's like I don't have that much of attachment in that sense, Sometimes I destroy them and then create a new one. So it's fun. It's a new way of relating to it. And well, I really wanted to explore the post-humanist philosophy, the queer theory, and caregiving as in the communal and political dimensions. And what is happening, I think it's the newest. Okay, so actually, what is happening right now, and the artwork that I'm working with right now, is a facial robot. So I'm creating so this is where the robot is going to be exhibited. It's actually going to be white, but my friend just sent me this image because it's being developed this week. So I created an older version of myself. So it's me in 2070. Okay, it's going to be when I'm like old. It's going to be all white, so it doesn't have this impact. But I really wanted to. The reason why I have my face is because in the other video it was me, it was trying to put myself in the situation, right? And also because people tend to think about a future of technology as us being like that we live forever, and that we're always pretty and these sexy humanoid robots, everywhere. So I'm like, no, I'm going to make myself old because it's how I'm going to be. And from like all the research, and all the outcome, the conclusion of everything for me was like, okay, like if I'm going to design a robot when I'm healthy for when I am not, and it's going to be my personalized robot because there's no way of creating an industry about assistance. If we don't even, like assistance is very personal, everybody likes to be taken care of in many different ways. So creating an industry around that, I'm not that sure about it, at least from my perspective. I know it has to exist, but I imagine I create this speculative project where I'm old and I created my feeding robot, and it doesn't only serve for feeding, it only serves for other things, like making me pretty, because I'm still single and I want to be great, for if I have a date and I need to go for dinner, I want the robot to be able to feed me, but also look splendorous, for example, it's like joking a little bit with all these ideas, but because I always try to work with a little bit of fun behind of my artworks, but it also has like a lot of things. The output will also have like a lot of things embedded in the research, especially in the conceptual research, and especially engaging with the community of people with disabilities in my surrounding. For example, they see the robot will try to explain that the body that needs to be cared for, it's a body, and sorry because I'm translating this directly from Spanish and it's been a little bit difficult for my brain, but it's like, it's a body that needs to be submitted, it's like I know what you want because I'm the doctor, for example, let's say it that way, so your body is submitted to a type of care that you're going to need. And especially of how things are going now, because my friends told me that until now, as a person with disabilities, you get money from the government in Spain, and you can spend that money in whoever you want, to take care of you. You know, they only have to have like maybe some regulations, you know, a title, a small course or something, but basically you can choose. And they have a very punk and activist community, and most of the people that help them is like that, because saying with their own words is like, if someone has to wipe my ass, I want to choose who that person is, you know? But now how things are going is that the government of Catalonia, at least, are going to control where you use that money for. So if you want to use that money, it can only be with people that have this specific, you know, like title, this specific education, you know, and that limitates a lot, because that's actually what is happening already in the hospitals and in the residencies. Because a lot of people might say, oh, all these women workers from the syndicate, you know, why they don't, and we need people in hospitals, why they don't go to the hospital? It's like, no, because they are not even in a legal situation. They cannot take a course and do that, and most of the courses are not even free, you know? So it's like, so all these political, you know, and economical things around care, I thought it was very important. So I'm going to translate that with the different materials of the robot. For example, using leather, as focusing on BDMS practices, for example, where the practice of submission, it's related to pleasure. You know, submission is transformed into pleasure. You know, so the body, you know, it's not submitted by force, but it's submitted by desire, and many other things that I will show you in a month that I cannot show you right now when the project is going to be an exhibition in Barcelona. And yeah, that's more or less what I can tell you about that. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but thank you very much.